latest episode of my community podcast, In Conversation with Nickie Aiken. These episodes focus on the important issues affecting people living and working in the two cities. You can listen to the podcast and the rest of the series in all the usual places, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And if you do enjoy listening, please do rate them. Today we are talking about the menopause, and I'm delighted to be joined with me by three amazing women who have got a lot of things to say about the menopause. First is Olivia Francis, who is a health and fitness expert and has been specialising over the last recent years on supporting women who are perimenopausal, menopausal and postmenopausal. We also have Dr. Wendy Denning, who is a private GP who has a lifelong interest in integrated medicines, bringing traditional medicine in with contemporary, and has a specialist interest in the menopause. And finally, I'm delighted that we've also got the global head of HR for Standard Chartered Bank, Tanuj Kaplaswamy. Now, we're talking menopause, and in the UK, 12 million women are currently in the menopause, which I think is a staggering number. I am one of those 12 million women, and I can tell you, I have not had the easiest of menopauses. Many people do. They can have amazing menopauses and they can go through it without a hint of an issue. But too many women are, I believe, suffering in silence. The government has a women's health consultation out at the moment, and I really hope that many women can talk about the menopause and their experiences, and that's what I want to talk about today, about the menopause. So first of all, Dr. Denning, can I ask you, are you seeing more women coming to you with issues around the menopause, perhaps not even knowing that they've got issues with the menopause, they don't even know they're in the menopause?
I definitely am seeing more women in that, and that's because there's a greater recognition of the menopause in general. I mean, compared to 10 years ago, compared to 20 years ago. But I still think there's not nearly enough conversation about the menopause. And in particular, I find that patients arrive and the first question is, you know, I've gone to see my GP and I've been told I can't have any hormones. That's one conversation I have. Or they've been told they can have them for 5 years and then they'll be cut off. So their first question to me is, how long can I continue them, obviously? To me, these are inappropriate. To me, I would love to see patients deciding whether they want to go on hormone replacement. But in order to do that, they need to have the right education, and the GPs need to be able to work conjunctively with them to make an informed choice about the risks and benefits of what they do around, whether they take HRT or not, what advice they get about exercise, diet, sleep, how to manage in the workplace. All of those things need to be considered. And so, yes, the answer is I'm increasingly seeing some people who really can't afford to see a private GP, but feel that they've got nowhere else to go.
Thanks. Olivia, you have obviously began specialising in health and fitness for women who are hitting the menopause. Why have you done that? What led you to do that?
I think the menopause just affected me so badly, not only within my relationship and family unit, but also for my job, with feeling overwhelmed, and the fatigue was enormous. And going to the doctor and them just pushing me away to take antidepressants, and it's the usual story. And I find so many women, because our GPs don't have that precious time to really find out, okay, what is it? Why are you feeling like this? And at the time I was 40, and because I was too young to be menopausal, I had to keep going back, trying to get a blood test. And when the blood test was eventually done, it was discovered that I was way beyond perimenopause and way into the menopause itself. So I thought, well, if I understand how to eat for health and I eat the right foods for energy, it was still overwhelming. So with the hormone imbalance, it's a question of getting into balance, but also adapting your lifestyle. And I had to make some huge changes, cutting alcohol out and making sure I got the right nutrition at the right time, getting enough sleep, managing the hot flushes, the children, the family, the divorce, which happened, a lot of it to do with the menopause because of the way that I was reacting. So it has this knock-on effect. And I thought, right, I have to do something about this. I have to understand the nutrition and I have to understand the exercise, because that has to be changed because our body has changed. So that is the reason why.
Okay. Tanuj, now I've just said 12 million women are currently in the menopause in the UK, and I suspect a number of them may work for Standard Chartered Bank. So how do you as an employer help your employees at this quite difficult transition in a woman's life?
Thanks, Nickie, first for inviting me into this very important conversation. I mean, the last big piece of data gathering that was done on this was via the Office of National Statistics in 2017, which basically said that 13% of UK workforce are women over 50. If you take that to the industry that I represent, financial services, this could equate to more than 130,000 women in financial services dealing with menopause transition at any point in time. We have announced just yesterday, in conjunction with the Financial Services Skills Commission, a deep piece of research with the Fawcett Society looking at menopausal transition within financial services, the impact it has on women, and the support that needs to be provided to them. So there's a big piece of research that we have launched, because the awareness of it, both driven by data and insights, and the conversation around in workplaces are nearly not where they need to be. It is clearly not seen enough of a well-being issue inside workplaces, and it's an area of deep interest to us. I mean, the only other angle I will take is that for many women, the point at which they have the opportunity to attain senior management roles inside companies could, and in quite a few cases does, coincide with menopause transition. So, if you look at my industry, where there is a gender imbalance in senior roles in the industry, it is pretty clear that unless we openly talk about this issue, examine this issue, create the support structures around this issue, we are not going to be able to tackle the gender imbalance in senior roles. So that's our real interest in this topic. That's led to this big piece of research that's been launched yesterday with, like I said, the Financial Services Skills Commission. And we are looking at announcing the findings to coincide with the World Menopause Day in October, and as an industry come together to take some concrete actions to support female colleagues with this transition.
Thanks. Dr. Wendy Denning, what does the government need to do? We've obviously got this women's health strategy consultation out at the moment, which ends next week. What, as you as a professional, do you think the government needs to do to support women in the menopause?
Just before I answer that, can I just go back to Tanu's point about changing the culture on menopause for working women? And funnily enough, the BMJ have launched something back in October 2019, which went through to, I'm just looking at the date, November 2019 to February 2020, and it was even in the medical profession, there was found to be huge gaps for women who are working in the menopause, even in our profession, which, and then there's a note here saying there are very few older women, this is one of the participants, left at the senior level in my traditional profession. If I mention my perimenopause symptoms, I would be stigmatized and disrespected as someone who is no longer rational or capable. That's in the medical profession. So, and that's going to be changed by, in my view, by a few things. One is launching more patient education. I think that whether women go on HRT or not has to be a patient-driven decision. I don't think it's a doctor's decision. I think it's the doctor's job to inform and to get the patient to make an informed choice. And I was very pleased. One of my friends, a trainer, and she said they're launching, you know, in her own practice, they are launching patient education forums where they bring in patients for to be educated by consultants. I would love to see that going across the board in lots more practices. I think there needs to be a lot more education, but there also needs to be more doctor's education. The average doctor gets a half day of training on the menopause in their postgraduate training. They might get a little bit more in their undergraduate training, but that's the amount of time that's allocated to it. And for me, as women, it's not just, you know, everyone thinks it's just about whether you go on hormones or you don't go on hormones. But actually, the much bigger conversation is women's bodies change at the menopause and their risks for their whole health risks change. And I don't think that is discussed enough. And I really would like the government to engage with the change in women's bodies at that time. So, and that's cardiovascular, that's bone, that's sexual activity, that's depression. All of these things need to be looked at and thought about so that women can start looking after themselves after they hit the menopause.
Thanks. Tanuj, so what do you think needs to happen within your own industry, financial services? I know you're doing this piece of work now, but from the discussions you've had internally, do you think that your organisation has got it right at the moment? Do you have policies in place for menopausal women? You know, from my own experience, you know, you can have insomnia for days on end and you literally can't get out of bed to go to work. So how can an organisation like yours help menopausal women?
Yeah, thanks, Nickie. I mean, I will just add on to one piece of statistic to what Dr. Denning said, because that really made an impact on me. There was a Wellbeing for Women survey done in 2016, and this was cross-industry, which said that severity of menopausal symptoms can result in women leaving their jobs, with 1 in 4 considering it. So in times that we are in today, the fact that 1 in 4, and this is not just financial services, I was really intrigued by Dr. Denning's insights within the medical profession. Women are considering stepping out of the workforce. And
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, 25% of women wanting to leave because of the menopause.
Yeah, the thought comes to the mind, and this is published research that exists. And that to me was really the piece of insight, as well as, you know, personal experience of speaking to colleagues, friends, which resulted in us as a bank sort of talking about this topic quite openly. So what are we already doing? You know, there is a well-being agenda, well-being strategy in the bank. The well-being strategy looks at a set of actions across 3 broad dimensions. The first one is support through education, information, training, skills development, websites, apps. So, you know, education, you know, spreading that. The second area is supporting via the working environment. So flexible working options, giving colleagues leave requirements, individual workplace adjustments where appropriate. So that's a second set of actions. And the third one is giving support for issues. Again, this is published data that 75% women have symptoms, 25% of them have severe symptoms. So we have employee assistance programs, training for people leaders, physical, mental first aid aiders training to support where the condition gets bad. Now, this is our general well-being program. Our view is we are perhaps not doing enough to tailor additional support that might be needed for our female colleagues with menopausal transition. So the objective of this research was, a lot of our work is being based on generic research. We don't have, you know, detailed information, good quality conversations with our financial services. And our objective is to get the data and research to be able to supplement the work we are doing with more targeted actions and targeted support. The one area where I do believe a lot more work needs to be done is education and awareness of people, leaders, and colleagues. So again, Dr. Denning spoke about education of doctors. I think there is specific support that's needed to train people, leaders who are supporting their colleagues through this transition. So that's the way we are approaching it.
That's amazing. Livia, what 3 things would you advise a woman who is going through the menopause to do from your health and fitness point of view, and also from your personal experience?
I would say number 1 is just look at your lifestyle. I mean, today we live in a world that's very stressed. We bring up our children, we put ourselves last, we work long hours. I think pretty much 70 to 80% of the female population feel like this. And there comes a point to which we have to get a message across. Whether that's through education, sex education, we speak about the menopause, which is starting to happen, which is absolutely fantastic. But then there's the aspect of when you bring your children up, how do you get the message to the busy mothers that want to do the exercise, that need to do the ironing and take the kids to school, etc.? Do we use radio? Do we use Facebook? A lot of women are using Facebook. So my number 1 point would be, let's get the message through about a lifestyle change, because we have to accept, and a lot of us, I think, and for me as well, I just kept carrying on doing the same thing, thinking, well, this will work because it worked previously. You know, when I was 20 and 30, I would do this and I'd lose weight and I'd feel good. When we hit the menopause, we have to accept that our body has changed and we have to adjust lifestyle, so stress. We have to really read up on education, be opening to listening about change. And I think some of the hardest things from a nutritional point of view is looking at the foods that are high in sugar and the alcohol and the coffee, things like that, trigger foods. And then I would also say my favorite aspect of it, which is the exercise. So traditionally, exercise always used to be high intensity. You have to build up a sweat in order to feel the beauty of exercise and get that weight loss that a lot of people are going for, or at least weight management. However, in menopause, as we stress our bodies, even under oxidative stress, we've got environmental stress, but also oxidative stress. And the Mayo Clinic has done a lot of research on this, on the menopause. We release cortisol. And of course, cortisol is that fight or flight hormone that makes us hold on to body fat. And that is one of the symptoms of menopause. And it can lead to depression, not fitting into your clothes and feeling as though your body isn't yours. So really adjust your exercise as well.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Denning, finally, what would your advice be to any woman who is listening to this podcast, or who might have a friend or anybody they know who they suspect is starting to go through the menopause? What would your advice be to them?
Monitor your symptoms, so you get a good picture of so that you can go to someone and they can get a sense of what's going on for you. So and that would be things to be watching for are things like sleep, fatigue, hot flashes. These are the things we should be looking for. Night sweats, libido, sexual activity, all of those things should be looked at. Then I would also ask people to look at what their alcohol content is, because Livia's brought this up. One of the things that changes when women hit the menopause, they can't tolerate alcohol in the same way. You just can't tolerate it. So it is a time to make a change and to see what things make their symptoms worse. So, a lot of women, Livia talked about it, are still drinking coffee, up to 6 o'clock in the evening, then wonder why they can't sleep. So, getting that right, I think, is very important. I think things like exercise, maybe it's a time to bring some exercise in, but what type of exercise? The real problem as women age actually is how much they stretch. In fact, the longevity is often related to how flexible your body is, not how toned your body is actually long term. So, stretching, Pilates, this sort of thing may become really into its fore at that point. But then I would say the places to go, some GPs are well adversed in menopause, some are not. If they encounter a GP that's not, I would ask for someone else in the practice that has more experience with it. If that doesn't work, I would ask to be referred on to a menopause clinic. I think, you know, and I would ask them what education they've got in their practice so that patient can learn a bit more about the menopause. I would also make sure that they have a sort of MOT check, so things like blood pressure looked at, weight is looked at, things like inflammatory markers are looked at, their thyroid is looked at, so that anything that's changing, that they can also engage with that at the same time.
Thank you. And Tanuj, what do you think employers should be doing from this moment on to support women in the menopause?
I mean, I will start off with there is a need for far greater education within the industry. You know, it always starts with education and awareness. Even some of the data points that have come up in this conversation, I'm not sure how widely they are being discussed within industry. So it starts off with education, awareness, and then a real focus on building the capability of leaders or managers within the business. Because ultimately, you can have organizational corporate policies, but ultimately it comes down to the experience a colleague has with their people leader as they are going through the transition. So what is the focus that companies are doing in developing capability of managers and colleagues in supporting those who are going through menopause, to my mind, is really, really going to be a key. Ultimately, I also think there is a responsibility to women within the industry to lean into these conversations as well. You know, I think it's been a taboo for a very, very long time. And there are many other aspects that get spoken about much more than this does. And I think there is a responsibility, I strongly think, to all women within the industry to lean into these conversations as well, and organizations to provide the safe space for women to be able to lean into these conversations.
I think you're absolutely right about women have got to take the lead now and shouldn't be afraid to do so. Dr. Wendy, we haven't mentioned at all HRT, and obviously we could talk about this for a long, long time, but
there are some things. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I thought I don't want this to finish without a few nods to that. There are some things I really think need to change. One of them is that there are still unsafe hormones being given to women, and I think they should be forcibly taken off the market. And I really do feel strongly about that. Most women are given estrogen and a progesterone, or some form of progesterone. 5-10 years ago, we didn't have natural progesterone available in this country, but we do now, and it's readily available, and it's perfectly safe, and it should be. And the progestins, which are called progesterone but aren't, and most doctors should know which ones they are, but I think that the progestins need to be taken off the market. They increase your risk of breast cancer, heart attacks, and strokes, and there is a very good natural progesterone, which is a good alternative. And one of the things you raised earlier, Nickie, was your issue with sleep. Now, if you give someone natural progesterone, the chances are, particularly if you give it orally, the chances are you're going to massively improve that person's sleep. And as that's the absolute double whammy for women in the menopause, because they're tired, they get to bed and they wake at 3 and 4 in the morning. They're lying there looking.
Been there, done that, believe me.
Oh my goodness. And it's like, and you know, up to then, Livia talked about it herself. She talked about how when we're younger, we think, right, I'll push, go to bed, get my sleep, and I'll do it all the next day. But you hit the menopause and you can't do it all the next day because you don't get any sleep. So you dread going to sleep, and you kind of, you know, you're exhausted during the day. So I would like to see the government take those progestins off the market. I would also like to really get some education around the length of time that women are allowed to use the HRT. I'm not saying that every woman should be on the HRT, but the BMJ did a wonderful article quite a number of years ago now about women and work, and they concluded that for most women at work, and I'm talking about, many jobs, they are going to need HRT. So and given that women work from the age, the age of retirement is 66. That is 15 years from the average age of the menopause, which is 51. 15 years. So where does I will give you hormones for 5 years come into that? Where does it work?
I get that. So what you're saying is, though, that there's been an awful lot of concern about HRT, but that is being proved wrong now, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a relative risk. If you look at, the relative risk, even 10,000 women, 7 heart attacks, 18 blood clots, 8 strokes, 8 breast cancers, and what's the relative risk? 97% of women will have treatment, have no adverse effects. Yeah. Now, really, we've got to look at, Livia talked about her breakdown of her marriage. Tanu's talked about not having enough people in the senior levels of her profession. What price are we paying for not giving women HRT when they need it?
Thank you. Look, ladies, thank you so much for your time today. I think we've had a really important discussion, and hopefully raising the issue to allow women to talk about it more. I'm on HRT, and I would recommend anybody talk to their GP seriously about it. There's been an awful lot of research since the scares of 20 odd years ago now. So we have come a long, long way, and I think the benefits will quite often outdo the issues around HRT. The government is involved in a women's health strategy call for evidence. They want to hear from you, so please do go to gov.uk and search up women's health strategy and do take part in the consultation. If the government hear from women's voices, we can change the strategy and get the health services that we as women need at all ages. But until the next time, thank you very much for listening, and thank you to my guests, and do not suffer in menopause silence.